An old man, having taught for more than half a century in the painted colonnade above the Athenian agora, is leaving the school late in the afternoon and catches his sandal on a stone in the path. He falls, and in falling, breaks a toe. He strikes the ground with his hand, addresses the earth as though it were a person summoning him, and says, "I come, why dost thou call me?" This is the death of Zeno of Citium, as Diogenes Laertius preserves it in his Lives of the Eminent Philosophers, set down some 5 centuries after the event. The old man, having spoken those words, walked home, refused food, and within a short time was dead. Whether he was 98 or 72, Laertius cannot quite say. The sources he had before him already disagreed, as sources will. But the moment itself, the small accident on the path, and the voice answering it, comes down to us with a strange and quiet authority. Zeno had spent his life teaching that the wise man lives according to nature. He took a broken toe as nature speaking, and he answered, "You have been told, perhaps, that the Stoics were severe men who walked toward death without flinching. You may have been told this so often that you no longer hear it. Set that aside. What we have in this small scene is not a posture. It is a man at the end of a very long life, reading a signal he believed nature had sent him, and accepting it. Whether he was right to read it that way is a question we will come to. But first, we must understand what he thought he was doing. The principle Zeno is enacting in that moment on the path has a Greek name. It is called eulogos exagogi, the reasonable departure. The phrase is preserved for us in several ancient sources, and it names a specific and difficult Stoic doctrine. It holds that the wise person, attending closely to the circumstances of his life and to the condition of his body, may at a certain point recognize that to continue living is no longer to live according to nature, and that the rational course is to take his leave. This is not, one must say at once, a license. It is not despair. It is not the modern category of suicide, freighted as that word is with assumptions the Stoics did not share. Eulogos exagoge is, in the Stoic understanding, the final exercise of the same faculty that governs every other choice in a philosophical life. The wise man asks at every moment, "What does nature now require of me?" Most often the answer is to continue, to bear, to act, to fulfill the role assigned. Sometimes, the Stoics held, the answer is to depart. Diogenes Laertius records the doctrine in summary form when he writes of the Stoic teaching. The wise man will, on reasonable grounds, make his own exit from life, either for his country's sake or for his friends, or if he suffer intolerable pain, or mutilation, or incurable disease. The grounds are specific. They are not states of feeling. They are conditions in which the rational person, looking with clear eyes at what nature has placed before him, judges that the body or the circumstances have become an obstacle to the life nature meant him to live. We are told by Cicero in his treatise on ends that the Stoic compared this moment to a host's signal at a feast. When the host says the feast is over, the well-mannered guest does not cling to the table. He rises and departs. Life, in this analogy, is something one has been invited to. One does not own it. One is present at it as a guest of nature, and when nature signals the time, one goes without protest. Notice what is being said here, and what is not. It is not being said that life is worthless. It is not being said that pain alone is sufficient cause. It is not being said that the philosopher chooses death because he prefers it. The Stoic, in his ordinary state, prefers life, prefers health, prefers to continue the work assigned to him. These are what the Stoics called preferred indifference. They are the natural materials of a human existence. The wise man does not throw them away, but the wise man also does not cling. And here is the difficult edge of the doctrine. The same reason that tells him to value life tells him at certain moments that life as he can now live, it is no longer the life nature intended. A broken body, an incurable disease, a circumstance in which to continue would require him to act against virtue. These are the signals. The Stoic reads them and answers. Zeno, falling on the path, reading the broken toe as the host's signal, is performing the doctrine he has taught. Whether the toe was truly sufficient, whether a man of his age was right to take so small an injury as the cue, this we will return to. What matters first is to see that he is not improvising. He is doing what his philosophy told him to do. To understand why an old man in Athens in the early decades of the 3rd century before our era was standing in that particular colonnade and walking down that particular path, one must go back some 50 or 60 years to a young merchant on a ship that sank. Zeno was not Athenian. He was born in Citium, a town on the southern coast of Cyprus of Phoenician descent. His father was a merchant who traded in purple dye, the costly Tyrian purple that the Mediterranean world prized for its depth and permanence. Zeno entered his father's trade, and at some point in his early 30s, by the most common account, he was sailing from Phoenicia to the Piraeus with a cargo of purple. The ship was wrecked. The cargo was lost. Zeno, finding himself in Athens with nothing to return to, wandered into a bookseller's shop. There he heard the bookseller reading aloud from Xenophon's Memorabilia, the account of Socrates and his conversations. He asked the bookseller where such men as Socrates were to be found. As the story is preserved, the bookseller pointed at a passing philosopher, the cynic Crates of Thebes, and said, "Follow that man." Zeno followed. He studied first under Crates, then under Stilpo of Megara, then under the dialecticians and the academics. He was a slow, careful student. Diogenes Laertius preserves the detail that Crates, finding Zeno too modest and reserved for the shameless public displays the cynics favored, once handed him a pot of lentil soup and ordered him to carry it through the Ceramacus, the potter's quarter, in full view of the Athenians. Zeno, ashamed, tried to hide it under his cloak. Crates struck the pot with his staff and broke it, and the lentil soup ran down Zeno's legs in front of the crowd. Zeno ran. Crates called after him, "Why flee, little Phoenician? Nothing terrible has happened to you." The lesson was not lost. Zeno later said that his shipwreck had been his most prosperous voyage because it had brought him to philosophy. After many years of study, Zeno began to teach. He chose for his lectures not a private grove, as Plato had done with the Academy, nor a gymnasium, as Aristotle had done with the Lyceum, but a public colonnade in the Agora. It was called the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch, after the murals of the Battle of Marathon and other scenes that adorned it. The Athenians who heard him lecturing there began to call his students Stoics after the porch. The name has held for 23 centuries. He lectured there for the rest of his life. He never owned a house in Athens. He lived simply, ate plain food, drank water more often than wine. He was thin, sun-darkened from his Cypriot childhood. with a slight stoop. He had a habit, the sources tell us, of crossing his fingers when he was thinking. He was not a charismatic speaker. He was deliberate and precise, more interested in the careful articulation of an argument than in winning over a crowd. And yet he became, by slow accumulation, one of the most respected men in Athens. The Athenians, who were not inclined to honor foreigners, gave him the keys to the city walls. The king of Macedon, Antigonus Gonatas, sought him out, attended his lectures when he came to Athens, and corresponded with him. When Zeno declined to come to the Macedonian court, citing his age, Antigonus accepted the refusal without offense. He had pupils who would become important in their own right. Cleanthes, who would succeed him as head of the school. Perseus, who did go to the Macedonian court in Zeno's place. Aristo of Chios, who broke with him on certain doctrines. Spherus, who would later advise Spartan kings. The school he founded would, 2 generations later, under Chrysippus, become one of the dominant philosophical movements of the Hellenistic world. In all this time, the man himself lived without ostentation. He had no family that the sources record. He had no estate. He took no pay for his teaching, though he accepted hospitality. He walked each day to the painted porch, lectured, walked home. He grew old in this rhythm. He had outlived most of the world he had known when he came to Athens. The generation of his first teachers was long gone. Antigonus Gonatas was an old man by now. Athens itself had changed, had been occupied, had been liberated, had been occupied again. The city in which Zeno fell on the path that afternoon was not the city in which he had begun to teach. He was a thread connecting one world to another, and he was, by every account, very tired. When the old man addresses the earth as a person and says, "I come, why dost thou call me?" he is not improvising a piece of theatre. He is reading. He is reading the small accident as a text nature has written for him, and he is answering it as he has spent his life teaching others to answer such texts. The line itself, in the Greek, preserved by Laertius, is borrowed from a tragedy. It is a quotation. Zeno, falling, reaches not for an original utterance, but for a line from the dramatic poets, and uses it to address the moment. This is itself characteristic. The Stoics were not in the habit of inventing rhetoric for grand occasions. They believed the language already existed for the situations a human being would face. One drew on what was there. What followed the fall is recorded with the same understatement. Zeno walked home. He did not call a physician. He did not lie down in protest of his injury. He simply, the sources tell us, refused food. He held his breath in one version. In another, more probable account, he abstained from eating and within a short time died. The death was peaceful and at home and on his own terms. It is important to ask, with a steady eye, whether this was reasonable. A broken toe, in a man of advanced age, is not an incurable disease. It is not a mutilation. It is not the sort of intolerable pain the doctrine names. By the strict criteria Diogenes Laertius preserves, Zeno's grounds were thin. But here we must consider what the doctrine actually requires. It requires that the wise man read the situation as a whole. Zeno was very old. He had been losing strength for years. The sources hint at long-standing complaints of the body. The toe was not the cause. The toe was the signal, the small punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence already written. He had been preparing for this departure, perhaps, for some time. The accident gave him the form of an answer. This is, one must say, the most contested moment in the doctrine of eulogos exegoge. Later Stoics would debate it. The criteria can be drawn strictly or loosely. Drawn strictly, the wise man departs only under extreme conditions, and Zeno may have departed prematurely. Drawn loosely, the wise man departs when his rational reading of his whole situation tells him the time has come, and the toe is sufficient, because Zeno's whole situation made it sufficient. We do not need to settle the question. We need only see what Zeno was doing. He was treating his death as a philosophical act. He was treating the moment of departure as itself a moment of practice. He was, at the end of a long life of teaching, that the wise man lives according to nature, demonstrating what it looked like to die according to nature. Consider, in this light, the other Stoics who followed his example and the ways in which they differed. Cleanthes, his successor, lived to a great age, and according to Laertius, died in a manner not unlike Zeno's. He developed an ulcer on his gum. The physicians advised him to fast for 2 days to allow it to heal. After the 2 days had passed, Cleanthes said that since he had now traveled so far along the road, he would not turn back, and he continued to fast until he died. The reasoning is more extended than Zeno's. The signal is given more time to be interpreted, but the structure is the same. The wise man reads the moment and answers it. Seneca, 3 centuries later, would write extensively on the doctrine. In his 77th letter to Lucilius, he tells the story of a man named Tullius Marcellinus, who, suffering from a wasting illness, called his friends together and consulted them on whether he should end his life. Seneca, narrating, approves the consultation. He writes that one of the friends, a Stoic, told Marcellinus that he should not regard the choice as a great matter. To live is not a good in itself, nor is it an evil. It is the manner of living that matters. When one can no longer live well, one should choose to live no longer. The same Seneca would, much later, be ordered to take his own life by the Emperor Nero. He did so with great deliberation, cutting his veins, taking poison, finally entering a hot bath to hasten the process. Tacitus records that he dictated to his secretaries throughout. The death took hours. Seneca's situation was not chosen, but the manner of his dying was, and he treated it as the final exercise of the philosophy he had spent his life writing about. Cato of Utica, in the previous century, had ended his life in Africa rather than fall into the hands of Julius Caesar. He spent his last evening reading Plato's Phaedo, the dialogue in which Socrates argues for the immortality of the soul before drinking the hemlock. Cato then took up his sword. His friends, finding him bleeding, summoned a physician who began to stitch the wound. Cato, regaining consciousness, tore out the stitches with his own hands and died. The deliberation, even in violence, is the same. The reasoning is laid out in advance. The act follows from the reasoning. These men did not all die the same death. Their circumstances were different. Their readings of their circumstances were different, but they shared a structure of attention. They held that the moment of departure, like every other moment of a philosophical life, was to be approached as a question. What does nature now require? Is the host signaling that the feast is over? If so, one rises and goes. Zeno's death, the first of these deaths in the tradition, sets the pattern. He establishes by the manner of his dying that a Stoic does not cling, does not negotiate, does not improvise. He reads and he answers. What then is the philosopher actually teaching us in this moment on the path? What beneath the doctrine and beyond the historical interest does Zeno want the careful listener to understand? He is teaching first that life is not owned. This is the substrate of the doctrine. The Stoic does not consider his life his property. He considers himself a guest at a feast, an actor assigned a role, a soldier given a post. The metaphors recur throughout the Stoic literature precisely because the point is foundational. One has been given a life. One has not purchased it. One does not therefore possess it in the manner one possesses something one has bought. This changes the question of how one holds one's life. If you do not own it, you cannot clutch it. You cannot defend it as you would defend a possession. You hold it, instead, as something on loan, something entrusted to you, something whose ultimate disposition is not yours. The Stoic does not therefore become careless of life. On the contrary, a guest at a feast is careful, is attentive, is grateful. But the guest does not refuse to leave when the host signals. He is teaching, second, that nature speaks in particulars. The fall on the path is a particular. The broken toe is a particular. The host does not send an abstract message. The host sends, in Stoic teaching, the actual circumstances one finds oneself in, and these circumstances are the signal. The wise man's task is not to wait for some grander sign. It is to read what is in front of him. This is the harder lesson. We are inclined, all of us, to wait for clarity. We are inclined to think that important decisions will be accompanied by certainty, by unmistakable indication. The Stoic teaching is that they will not. They will be accompanied by particulars, a toe, a piece of news, a turn in a conversation, a morning when one cannot rise. The signal is always small, because the signal is always the actual situation, and the actual situation is always made of small things. He is teaching, third, that practice precedes the moment. Zeno's reading of the fall, his composed walk home, his refusal of food, his quiet death, these are not the products of a sudden access of philosophical insight at the end of his life. They are the products of 50 years of practice. He had spent his life teaching himself to read circumstances as nature's signals. By the time the actual moment came, the reading was already in his hands. This is perhaps the deepest of the lessons. The Stoic does not believe one can summon, at the moment of crisis, capacities one has not built. The way one will die is the way one has lived. The composure at the end is the composure cultivated through every smaller moment. Zeno did not become a Stoic on the path. He had been one for half a century. The moment on the path was the form his lifetime took. He is teaching, fourth, that the wise man's death is itself a teaching. Zeno does not die in private. He dies in such a way that the story can be told. He addresses the earth aloud. He uses a quotation from tragedy. He goes home and refuses food in a manner his students will hear of. The death is the last lecture. The death is the demonstration that the doctrine he taught was a doctrine he could enact. One must be careful here. This is not theatre. Zeno is not performing for an audience he cannot see. He is, rather, holding himself to the same standard at the end of life that he held himself to throughout. The teacher of Stoicism cannot die in a manner inconsistent with what he has taught. The integrity of the doctrine and the integrity of the man are, for the Stoic, the same integrity. And he is teaching, fifth and finally, that there is no occasion at which one is excused from philosophy. The fall on the path is, by ordinary standards, a small embarrassment. An old man stumbling, a bruised hand. The temptation, even for a philosopher, is to wave it off, to laugh, to call for assistance, to go on as before. Zeno does not. He treats the small embarrassment as worthy of his full attention. He reads it as carefully as he would read an oracle. There is in this a kind of dignity that is foreign to most ways of living, the dignity of being available at every moment to what the moment actually is, of refusing to dismiss any particular as too small to matter, of being at 98 or 72 still a student of nature's speech. This is what the Stoic means by living according to nature, not living in a forest, not living without comfort, not living without society, living rather in continuous attention to what nature is saying through the circumstances one finds oneself in. The wise man is the man who attends. The wise man's death is the death of an attender. You will not, in all probability, find yourself in Zeno's situation. You are not most likely 90 years old, and you have not built a philosophical school over half a century, and you do not have a body so worn that a broken toe could plausibly be the host's signal. The specific application of the doctrine is not, in this moment, your concern, but the structure of attention Zeno demonstrates is available to you, and the structure of attention is the thing the lesson actually offers. He attended to a small particular. He read it as speech. He answered without protest. He did not cling. The question to carry with you is not whether you would, in some extreme circumstance, recognize the host's signal and rise from the table. That question is too remote to be useful. The question is rather this: what are the small particulars of your present life that you are dismissing as too minor to attend to? What signals, smaller than a fall on a path, are you waving off because they do not announce themselves grandly? What is nature saying to you in the form of an ordinary morning, an ordinary conversation, an ordinary fatigue? The Stoic position is that everything that happens to you is speech, not metaphor, not symbol. Speech in the sense of communication, from the order of things to the part of you that can listen. To be a student of this position is to take the speech seriously, to be willing to be addressed by what would otherwise pass unnoticed. Zeno died because he had been listening all his life. The death was continuous with the listening. There was no break, no sudden access of meaning, no transformation. He simply heard, on that afternoon, what he had been hearing in smaller forms for decades, and he answered as he had always answered. You may ask yourself, this evening or tomorrow morning, what you have not been hearing. You may ask yourself what particular of your present circumstance has been speaking to you in a voice you have been declining to recognize. You may ask yourself whether the practice of attending, which the Stoics held to be the whole of philosophy, is a practice you have undertaken or only admired. The old man on the path is gone. The painted porch is gone, though its foundations have been excavated, and you can stand on them if you go to Athens. The school he founded is gone. The doctrine, in its precise Hellenistic form, is preserved only in fragments and summaries, and the late, dignified prose of Romans who came after. But the structure of attention is not gone. It is, in fact, what was being passed down all along. The doctrines are scaffolding. The attention is the building. Zeno, at the end, simply attended. So may you, at any moment you choose, attend. The choice is, by the philosopher's own account, always before you. I come, he said, why dost thou call me? The earth had called. He had heard. He answered, let that be enough for today.